Hello and welcome to Soulful Scrutiny. We have a very special episode for you today. We decided to do an interview with the Honorable Arnhim Eustace. Mr. Eustace, for those of you from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, was a former Prime Minister, interim Prime Minister, right after James Michel stepped down. And he was also, in recent times, the opposition leader, as well as the president of the New Democratic Party, also known as the NDP. Mr. Eustace recently resigned, and there have been like a whole bunch of speculation as to why he resigned. And I wanted to talk to him. So I called and I asked, could I do an interview with you by Skype? And I was told, no problem. About a few days later, when we were supposed to do the interview, he was not feeling well, and I felt it would be best to do it when he's feeling better. So I called about a week later, and I was told that he is feeling better, and is actually in New Jersey. So we decided I spoke to Mr. Eustace, and he told me that he was in New Jersey. I just wanted to follow up to see how he was doing, was he feeling better, etc. And he said he's in New Jersey, and I said, well, I live in Long Island. Do you mind if I come to New Jersey and interview you the week after Christmas? But then I started thinking, the week after Christmas, I've taken some vacation. I'm trying to relax. It would be better if I get it done before the Christmas vacation. So I called him back and I said, would it be okay if I meet with you on this weekend, which was the weekend of, I believe that was the 17th. And he said, no problem. So we traveled. I got my son, Joseph, and I got a member of my crew, my CUEXTV crew. We picked her up in the Bronx, and we head down to New Jersey and drove deep into New Jersey. We met the Eustace family was waiting on us. He was staying at his son's house, him and Mrs. Eustace, Jennifer Eustace. And we also met the grandchildren, the daughter-in-law, and of course the younger Mr. Eustace. I had a very deep interview with Mr. Eustace. I felt he was being very forthright and honest. We did the interview, and then as I was getting ready to wrap it up, I said to him, well, I want to interview the family. And he said, well, maybe I should move so that they could be more honest. And I said, no, they could just sit together. And we did the interview. Now, I must tell you that my son Joseph, who went with me, is 13 years old. And he said to me the day before the interview, he said, I want to dress in my church clothes. And I said, why? Because typically teenagers that age, they are typically wanting to put on the kind of flashy sports clothes, the sweatshirt and the t-shirt and the sweatpants and the jeans. And he said, no, I want to dress in my my church clothes, my white shirt and tie and my black pants. And I said, okay. I was very shocked because normally I have to fight with him. The only time he wants to get dressed up in formal clothes is when he's in church. So I said, okay, no problem. And we did the interview, and I told Mr. Eustace about it, that Joseph basically shocked me by saying that he wanted to dress formally, because he said, Mom, he's a very important man. It didn't click on me right away. Actually, it didn't click at all. And we did the interview. I thought it was a very honest interview. We talked to Mrs. Eustace and the children and the daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law said something which was really wonderful. She said, a lot of people have problems with their in-laws. I have never had those problems. Basically she's been in a family that's been supportive of her and embraces her. And I thought that was very nice. I asked Mrs. Eustace, what has it been like being married to Arnhim Eustace, who is known as, even some of his opponents would categorize him as being too clean for politics. And she rolled her eyes a bit playfully, and then she said, well, he's just a human like everybody else. He's got his faults like everybody else. And she said, but he's a very quiet person and a good person. And I thought that was very honest, as opposed to some people who their marriage is a mess, but they want to let you believe that it's all perfect. She's saying, my husband is a human being with, different, with his faults like everybody else, but he's a decent human being. So I thought that was very genuine and very nice. And his son said to me, he said, my dad, he basically said he emulates his dad in terms of how he fathered his children. There are two of them. And he said, he has 4 children, and his dad became that person that he emulates as to how he fathers his children. So I thought that was really sweet, very, very touching, that your child could have that image of you as being, his role model. Because a lot of time our children are looking to celebrities to be their role models as opposed to their family members. So that was sweet. On our way back, after we did the interview and we bid the Eustace family goodbye, and we head back to Long Island, and this day we traveled in the bad weather. I mean, it looked so dismal. We have solar energy at our home, and we literally, that was the first day I saw where it generated no energy because it was literally looking almost like night, and it was that cloudy, that dark. And so we got ready and we traveled back to to Long Island rather, and we bid the Eustace family goodbye. A very beautiful interview, I thought. I try to ask questions that a lot of people wanted of me, just to really sit and really get an understanding into who he is as a man. Because I've met Mr. Eustace a few times, I've spoken to him briefly, but really never sat down and really. I've listened to some of his speeches and so forth, read some things that he's written, but really hadn't sat across from him and really get deep and personal into his life. And so I want you to judge for yourself, how you think the interview is. But then I went back to Long Island. My son, after I had dropped a crew member off in the Bronx, he said to me, I really think that was a nice interview, Mom. She said, earlier this year, I was asked to write about somebody who's famous, and I wrote about Mr. Eustace. And he said, I went online, I did my research, and I wrote about him. And when he said that, I remember that is the truth, that he did do something, but I had forgotten. So now it all came together. That's why when he talked about, dressing up in his formal clothes, this is his hero. This is somebody he's written about and who he admires, and he wanted to impress him. And I thought that was really nice. Now, we did this interview, again, like I said earlier, that we could get a really in-depth interview in terms of what happened, why did he step down, is he still strongly supporting the party, etc. And I think he answered those questions truthfully. What I got from him is a sense of this is a man who, he is not going to necessarily tell you what you want to hear, but he will be honest with you in terms of his feelings about things. And someone once said to me, oh, he's too honest for politics. And I think some of his opponents had been reported as saying that. And maybe that's the truth, but wouldn't it be so much better if we had people in politics that really told us the truth? I found him to be a very genuine person. I found him to be a very solid person. I liked the family dynamics that I felt in that home. And really was glad that I made that long trip in that dreary weather to meet with Mr. Arnhim Eustace. So I'm going to ask everyone to be the judge of this interview. It should be in a couple of pieces. We're going to be releasing it in several pieces. And we hope that you will share your ideas and your feedback. I do want to say that we at QX Television open the door and invite the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, if he wishes to discuss his side of the events and the stories regarding the general election, or his being the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and some of the things that are going on with the country. We will welcome you, and we will be happy to interview you and have this forum to get your word out and to give your side of the story. So the door remains open. You're welcome to walk in and let us know if you're interested in doing an interview with us. Hello and welcome to this edition of Soulful Scrutiny. Today on Soulful Scrutiny, I have a very important guest on the program. The Honorable Arnhim Eustace, former Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and recently opposition leader, as well as the president of the New Democratic Party, which also is known as the NDP. Welcome to the program, Mr. Eustace.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I'm happy to be here.
You have been very vibrant in the political scene in St. Vincent and the Grenadines for many years. And you have run against the ULP, headed by Dr. Gonsalves, for many years. You at one point was an interim prime minister.
Yeah.
And you gave that up, so to speak, for fresh elections.
Yes.
Because you're taking over from James Mitchell,
yeah.
former Prime Minister. You since became the opposition leader, the main opposition leader.
Yeah.
And recently you stepped down.
Yes.
And there were a bevy of questions and, you know, frustration on some parts because there are many people who still cannot, you know, kind of see somebody else in that role as far as the opposition leader.
That's true, yeah.
For the NDP. So I thought of putting this interview together, and we tried to work something out via Skype, and we were not able to get it done at that point. And later I found out that you were here in the tri-state area, and thought, you know what, I'm going to come out on a Sunday when I normally be in church. I'm going to drive miles and miles into this area and visit you and sit down and talk to you in person. So again, welcome to Soulful Scrutiny.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Because, like I said earlier, a lot of people are kind of puzzled, and some may not be puzzled, some are frustrated, some, you know, had questions. So I went to relatives, friends, and supporters, as well as some opponents, and asked questions. You know, I'm going to be interviewing him. What are some of the things you might want me to ask him? And I'm going to take it now to an integral part of your political career. In 2015, you ran against Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, who is the current Prime Minister of St. Vincent and Grenadines, and who is the head of the ULP, or Unity Labour Party. For many within the NDP, the victory in 2015, December 9th to be exact, was a shock and seen as fraudulent. But for others, cries of fraud from your party, the NDP, was seen as cries from a sore loser. Can you tell us in your words why you and others in your party have proclaimed the 2015 general elections in St. Vincent and the Grenadines to be fraudulent?
Basically, we had election observers in St. Vincent and the Grenadines from the Commonwealth Secretariat, we also had from the OAS, we also had from CARICOM, and the Christian Council was also monitoring and looking at the elections. At the completion of the poll, during the time the count was going on, there are a number of things that happened that we are concerned about. At one stage, they stopped broadcasting for quite a while. At the time when Mr. Exeter was leading. And when he came back, Mr. Straker was ahead by a wide margin. So
they stopped reporting on the air.
Yeah, they were
and then at that point, your person from the NDP was leading, and they just stopped at the broadcast, and then later on they came back, and the other side is leading.
And leading by a large margin. So we were concerned about that, and we were also hearing during the course of the day about certain irregularities. We decided that we'd be looking carefully at the results, and a bit of work was done with the various institutions that monitored the poll, and we had our concerns. And they grew because we started to hear from people about events that took place during the time of the election, on the election day itself. That we were very suspicious. We found out something that as a party we could not accept. That in the central Leeward seat, where Ms. Exeter runs, which covers the Barrowley area, central Leeward of the island, we found out that a number of persons had ballots which did not have the stamp of the presiding officer. If a ballot does not have the stamp of the presiding officer, it can't be counted. Because you don't know who. You cannot say it's a valid ballot.
Right.
We found out from people who were monitoring the poll, including our own monitors, that in fact, in some cases, the stamp of the presiding officer was on the counterfoil and not on the ballot.
The counterfoil is sort of like what, a receipt to the ballot?
It has the name of the, and it can be torn off. It's perforated and can be torn off. Okay. And that normally would be a mark on the ballot, which also includes the signature of the presiding officer. if that ballot is counted, is against the law. Such ballots should not be counted in election. The fact remains they were counted. And we have evidence that shows that they were counted. And we have a statement of the presiding officer to that effect. And these are hundreds of ballots.
Wow. This is a small population of about 110,000 people.
Yeah, and you know, hundreds of ballots in one polling station alone. They had hundreds, and we had 2 polling stations, and some others were chief checks in, which also had those ballots. They should not have been counted at all.
Should not have been counted. Okay.
And then the OAS, in sending their report as observers, they were there when the count was taking place in that constituency. And they realized that these ballots were questioned by our side. And they put that in their report, the OAS report, which implies on their part that they don't think it was fair.
And AOS is?
OAS, Organization of American States.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, which you remember. And we have filed petitions dealing with this matter. The petitions have taken a while before they've been held. A year has passed, and all sorts of things are put in the wait. And all sorts of reasons are given for delays and so on. And a whole year has passed. But we are confident that the evidence that we have will show that those ballots were counted, should not have been counted, and at least you should have a by-election in that constituency.
Is it 1 or 2 constituents where this happened?
You also have a petition for the North Windward constituency. That's above George. So Central Leeward and North Windward. North Windward is in the Georgetown, Sandy Bay area. The evidence is quite strong. Quite strong. I've just given you one in relation to the ballots, but there are other factors.
Irregularities.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we are concerned, very concerned about that, and the resulting delays, which has impacted negatively on people. When that petition is held, our position will be upheld. The party's position in the election.
So when we are on the impression that it was thrown out, what really is...
No, the judge...
We're not clear what happened.
The judge made a statement in dealing with one of the other matters preliminary to the case. That if the petition came before him, he would throw them out.
Okay.
If it came before him.
Okay.
Which we rejected out of hand.
Right. So that is not the judge that this would be going to
But
ultimately.
the question is now whether he will recuse himself or whether we'll ask for his removal.
Right. Okay. Okay. Now, cries of fraud in elections are nothing new to elections around the world. We see that happening right here in the United States, and certainly not in the Caribbean. But generally, they subside, and the losing party goes on to become the opposition. This was not to be the case in the December 2015 election in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Subsequent to this cry of election fraud, charges were filed, as we just discussed, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines to address the allegations that the elections were not free and fair. And you were just telling us a minute ago that it was the preliminary matters regarding the election where you're trying to prove that things were going on there that were very irregular, that was not successful, and that the judge who made certain statements, you were hoping that he would recuse himself, and if not, you would be acting.
Well, we feel that he'll have to recuse himself.
Right, making a statement like that.
Having made a statement, in addition to that, we are very confident about the evidence that we have that is now before the court. It just has not yet been heard. Just a few days ago, we had to have an injunction to prevent the destruction of the ballots.
Oh, okay.
Because ballots can be destroyed 1 year after the election.
Even when there is a pending case?
That's right.
Oh dear.
So we had to take out an injunction a few days ago to stop that.
Okay.
There was no delay in that regard. It has been granted.
Okay.
so the ballots cannot be destroyed. And in fact, we had filed a case on that matter before, to have the supervised election pass over the ballots to the registrar of the High Court. And the court did not approve that. So this is our second attempt to get to
So you asked that the ballots be passed over to somebody in the High Court. And that was not granted.
It was not granted.
And even in the middle of a court case.
Yeah, it wasn't granted.
And even in the middle of a court case, you're saying that I'm not clear on this. They would have destroyed the ballots even when this is still pending?
Once a year is up, you can destroy the ballots.
But with something going on like this,
you're not to, but the point is you have to make a move
to make sure prevent it. Right, okay. Following the elections, the country erupted in protests.
Yeah.
Which many would have, which many believe would have forced the Gonsalves administration to call new elections. Can you tell us why those protests subsided?
The delays in the court action is the main reason. The delays in the court action.
Are there other contributing factors, like, for instance, there were arrests, from what I heard?
No, there were arrests of protesters on various occasions. There were situations where we had to confront the police. As a matter of fact, I was saved from a battle because the police were using metal barriers to push us back on the protest line and so. And one fella aimed to hit me, and somebody jumped in front of me to stop me from being hit by him. So it was quite heated on a number of occasions.
So he took the blow for you?
Yeah, he took the blow for me.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, in my statement when I stepped down, I thanked him in particular for what he did. But the point is that we are confident about our evidence.
Right.
And all the delays are there because they know what evidence we have. But and now you have the lawyer for the other side now saying nothing should be done before February because
February of 2017.
Yes.
I remember Lizette King.
Yeah.
At one point, you mentioned that earlier that someone had to take a baton for you because you were about to be hit by the police. I remember Lizette King, an activist who was there in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and who is walking on the front line.
Yeah, she's
every day since the election to protest this fraud, what she considers a fraudulent election. And she, at one point, I remember, was arrested by police officers. And this woman, her whole clothes was, practically torn off of her and exposed. This is a mature woman who would be old enough, and probably even older than the mothers of many of those officers that were involved in this. And there are other people. There was one guy, I remember, who got his ribs broken. There were, other protesters who were arrested. Yeah. And I never saw anything saying that they were being violent or... they were protesting, it seemed to me, peacefully. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, no, they're protesting peacefully. All the time they protested peacefully. What happens is, from time to time, the police would try to move them. And then they'll have resistance. They were trying to move in the day when I got involved.
Right.
I stood there, but they're pushing us back with these shields. We just stood our ground. But Luzette... Let me say this about Luzette. Luzette is a very brave woman, very committed to the cause. I have the greatest respect for her and admiration. She took upon herself to come to St. Vincent at this point.
Because she lives here in the United States.
Yes, she took it on herself to come. And she's been there for a year. It is true she's retired.
So she's been persistent. One wonders why aren't others, or more people, let me say, more persistent.
More people.
If this fraudulent thing is true, why aren't more people not being persistent like she is? She hasn't backed down. She is.
I know that will not back down. My concern is that at the beginning of the protest, in the early months of the protest, there was a lot of enthusiasm. As the blockages came in the court, people began to get more and more frustrated with the process.
Okay.
And it's very hard unless you have something very violent. It's very hard to maintain people's interest. those people are there are a very dedicated group of people.
So you're saying at some point, it sounds like this is what you're saying, that people, when they saw that the court system was really not working for the system in general, got disheartened. The court is against us. What can we do?
Yeah, that is part of the problem. You know? And I blame some of my own colleagues for not being there as often as they should be.
Right. I remember one gentleman said to me, if each of those folks were to get 15 people from their constituent and show presence, things might have turned out differently. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yes, but you see, there was a general falling off when the people realized that the matter is not going to be settled soon. Or they began to doubt whether it will ever be settled.
Right.
Because of the court
Do you
action.
believe it will be settled?
Yeah, it will be settled.
It will be settled.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have since stepped down, as you mentioned earlier, as opposition leader and head of the you were opposition leader and head of the president of the NDP, which is the New Democratic Party. And many believe you were pressured out by members of your own party. Some believe you succumbed to the propaganda machine of the Gonsalves administration, and still others believe you simply got tired of trying to work within a system that is rigged against you. Which version, if any, of this is true? And if not, can you tell us why you stepped down or stepped aside?
First of all, let me say something, which people in Simmons know, but it's not recognized. This is my 47th year in public life, this year, 2016.
So when you became Prime Minister, you were already, I've been out of St. Vincent and Grenadines for years.
You
were there way before that.
I had already given over 30 years service to the people of St. Vincent and Grenadines.
Okay.
I started since 1969.
Well, you're an old soldier. Okay.
I joined the service as an administrative cadet in 1969. By 1977, I had already reached the rank of permanent secretary when I was just about 31 years old. So I'm looking forward to a life of the next 25 years of being a civil servant.
Okay.
The problem with that is that I couldn't make that anyway. And a lot of actions were being taken against me by the Cato regime. No file came across my desk at one time for 3 years, you know.
Wow.
Because I used to speak on the platform, even as a public service in the Black Power movement.
Oh, you were part of Black Power?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was Brother X.
Mr. Clean, you're part of Black Power.
Yes, okay. I was very much involved with that, you know. And during that period, still a very young age, I was head of the Public Service Union when I was 26.
Oh, okay.
Head of the Public Service Union.
At 26?
At 26, yeah. Right. I was director of planning in my 20s also. And I became head of the Ministry of Trade and Agriculture as permanent secretary around the time I was getting to 30.
So you've always been a lover and a supporter of agriculture?
Oh yes.
Okay.
There's no question about that. I operate a farm now. We operate a farm. But I left in 1977 because of an altercation with the Joshua Cato government. The Ministry of Trade and Agriculture brought a case against a company in St. Vincent, which is foreign owned, which refused to pay traders' licenses, which is only $12 a year. Wow. All small shops pay that kind of traders' license. It's a multinational corporation.
Right.
They refused to pay it because the lawyer was the nephew of the Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Joshua.
Oh, okay.
And they tried to get me to drop the case as permanent. I would not do it. So finally, the magistrate said she's not postponing anymore. And they said, well, they came to me again to drop the case. I refused. I took my bag and I went home. When I came back the next morning, Mr. Joshua himself, as minister, dropped the case. I immediately resigned as permanent secretary.
You've been a man who stood on principle.
I couldn't stand that. So I just left. It's unheard of for a permanent secretary to resign.
Right, because that's not a political office.
No, no.
Right, so you could have just...
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I left, and then I spent the next couple of months in St. Vincent, because I still had leave.
Mm-hmm.
And then I applied to the Caribbean Development, to CARICOM and the Caribbean Development Bank, to the OECS Secretariat looking for a job.
Right.
CARICOM under President Dimas,
Mm-hmm.
Secretary General, offered me a job as transport economist in CARICOM.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Cato refused to release me.
Oh.
Because if the government objects, you can't get to the regional institution, CARICOM.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Cato was Prime Minister and also, not the Unity Labour Party, but a leg of it, the Labour Party.
Labour Party.
Right, and this Unity Labour Party is a spring off.
A spring off, yes.
Okay.
But he blocked my appointment.
Mm-hmm.
It turned out that a few months later, Mr. Dimas became president of the Caribbean Development Bank.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have that role at the Caribbean Development Bank.
Okay. Couldn't block you.
Yeah, he couldn't block me.
Right.
And therefore, I was off by the same Mr. Dimas
Mm-hmm.
to come to the Caribbean Development Bank
Okay.
as administrative officer.
All right.
He came to the airport and interviewed me in between flights and went back to Barbados.
He really wanted you.
So I went to the bank, Caribbean Development Bank, and I served there for 16 years. I started out as an administrative officer,
Mm-hmm.
and I left as director of the projects
Mm-hmm.
department of the bank, which is the largest department of the bank.
Mm-hmm.
I had the number 3 position in the Caribbean Development Bank. And that's a regional institution, but with membership from Europe
Mm-hmm.
and from Canada and so forth, all members. And I served there, and I was responsible for loans to the various countries in the region.
Mm-hmm.
That's my department, did all loans.
You have a long history.
Yeah. And we
Southern
are averaging
Republic.
$100 million a year in loans
Mm-hmm.
during my tenure
Mm-hmm.
as director of projects.
Okay.
You know? So I've had a lot of exposure to the World Bank, the IMF, European Union, African Development Bank, Inter-American Development Bank. I've had a lot of experience over those years
Right.
in dealing with those institutions.
Mm-hmm. But now back to my question earlier, which is, were you pressured to step down, or you just got tired?
I'm coming to that.
Mm-hmm.
By the time I left the CDB, I should have been retiring.
Okay.
Because then I came back as fiscal advisor to the government.
To the James Mitchell administration, yeah.
And serving that for another 4-5 years.
Okay.
And then I resigned to run for election in 1998.
Oh, so you came into election, to the political part, that type of office late.
Only in 1998.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that I served there for the next 16, almost 17 years.
Right.
You know, so that's why I say I've been working on the ground for 47 years.
47 years. Mm-hmm.
Without any real break in that entire period of time.
Okay.
You know? So after the question of the election in December 2015, I won my seat again.
Because you've always won your seats.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I won 5 times already.
Mm-hmm.
I met with our people on several occasions, our party. And in July, I told them that I'm considering leaving.
Mm-hmm.
We had a retreat of the party looking towards the future.
Right.
And I announced in that meeting.
Right. Outside of public
Yes, our
Yes.
internal meeting. And I had subsequent meetings with my members, members of parliament.
You're preparing them, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I indicated clearly since July 26th
Mm-hmm.
that I was leaving. So nobody pressured me out.
Okay. So we got that clear. We're not
I
pressured.
took a decision, and I think part of it I got partly frustrated with the length of the process and what is taking place.
Something that shouldn't have taken this long.
Yeah.
There's a saying that if you have a person with nothing to hide, hide nothing. So if there are fraudulent claims and it is not fraudulent, I don't know. I would think, well, people just want to clear that up.
Yeah, but people got very frustrated. That is my view.
Many were flabbergasted that the man they dubbed Mr. Clean, and some even say Mr. Cool, was not victorious in that election incidents on the Grenadines against a man who many see as a very flawed character.
Yeah.
Many felt that even if they were fraud, he should not have been able to win the election because of the economic state of the country,
Yeah.
the infamous sex tapes that we know about on the internet,
Yeah.
and so many other things seem as negatives in his corner. How do you respond to this? In other words, they're saying, even those who believe that there was fraud, okay, and you would have more information, more direct information than others. They're saying there's still enough people that voted for him that if there was fraud, the fraud helped him, but there was still too much people that voted for him against somebody who is a family man, who is known as a decent person, a calm person, a clean person, a compassionate person, and I can go on and on about the things that people have said to me getting ready for this interview. How was that possible? Even with let's say the fraud is proven.
No, but the fraud was plenty of votes. Plenty of votes were involved in that fraud. There are people who are transferred into various constituencies. I know an area in my own constituency where 11 people are living in a house, none of whom belong to the constituency. But they've been transferred into your constituency.
Okay. So and this wasn't just what you mentioned about the irregular ballots and all of that. No. There were people moved from their constituent into other constituent to make their people win.
Yeah.
Wow.
They were transferred into various constituencies. In the hundreds.
Oh. And hundreds in a small country like St. Vincent is a lot.
And let me tell you, they've started doing that again now. Where we have continuous registration. But the government is no longer giving, the supervisor office is no longer giving the names of the transfers. They're required to give the names of the transfers.
Is the supervisor of election a political appointment?
No, not a political. It should not be a political.
So she should not have a, you know.
No, the whole registration process
is
run by people in the party.
But in a fair wall, the supervisor of election should not be swaying towards one party or the other.
Exactly.
All right, we're going to come back. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to continue on that.